We're going to deal all through these passages with this issue of justice. What do we mean by justice? We throw that term around a lot. What do we really mean? How do we define it? How do you define what we generally connote by justice? And so most of us, I say, well, that's to protect the innocent and punish the guilty. That approximates what we mean by justice. Well, another way to look at it is, okay, what's injustice? Just the opposite of that. The guilty go free, the innocent are found guilty. And the great tragedy of our own jurisprudence system is that it's imperfect. Sometimes that does happen. Maybe it happens more often than it should, but it does happen. What do we really mean then by justice for all? We adhere to that as a goal. It's interesting to realize that injustice is a major theme in literature. All over literature you'll find themes of that. The Count of Monte Cristo, the fiction by Alexander Dumas, is one of the classics of the trying to remedy an injustice as a key part of the plot. A plot is typically a problem and its solution, and of course Alexander Dumas does it so colorfully that created that classic. There's another classic of sorts, Ben-Hur, written by the governor of New Mexico, a guy by the name of Lew Wallace, who was stationed as a soldier in Palestine for a while, picked up a lot of that and wrote a novel, his first novel, and it's one that's endured as a classic. Again, it dwells upon this remedying of injustice as its key theme. Well, in reality, there are many examples of this, but one of the most important ones in history, strangely enough, was the trial of Alfred Dreyfus in France. And we want to talk a little bit about that because it has an impact that many people don't realize. In 1894, Dreyfus was accused of selling secrets. He was an officer in the French military. He was accused of selling secrets to the German military attaché. And he was convicted and sent to Devil's Island. The press, La Libre Parole, used Dreyfus to symbolize the supposed disloyalty of the French Jews. In other words, it was presented and promoted as a typical behavior of the French Jewish establishment. Lieutenant George Picquart found evidence that Major C.F. Esterhazy was the real guilty party and had incriminated Dreyfus. Major Hubert Joseph Henry was the discoverer of a letter attributed to Dreyfus and a conspirator in the subsequent falsification of evidence. Now, on January 13th of 1898, the novelist, very famous novelist in many ways, Emile Zola, wrote an open letter published on the front page of Aurora called Je accuse. In other words, I accuse. 200,000 copies were distributed, so much so that Zola himself was put on trial and found guilty of libel because he was declaring Dreyfus's innocence, and he ended up being put on trial. Major Henry committed suicide, leaving a confession. Esterhazy fled the country. These were the real conspirators. A new minister took office and resolved to clear up the entire matter. Dreyfus was brought back from Devil's Island, cleared, and reinstated in 1904 and given the Legion of Honor as some modest remedy for the injustice that was perpetrated on Dreyfus. Now, why are we getting into this? Well, because there was one of the observers of the Dreyfus debacle that was a big cause célèbre in the past for quite a few years. There was a gentleman by the name of Theodor Herzl who became convinced while watching all of that a Jew will never get justice without a country of his own. And so he published what turned out to be a landmark treatise called Der Judenstaat. That is that was in German, the Jewish state. And he postulates that was an essential requirement for the Jewish community. He goes on to organize the first Zionist Congress in 1897, and his subsequent history, of course, causes him to be regarded as the father of Zionism to this day, Theodor Herzl, motivated in large measure by his observation of the injustices brought about by the Alfred Dreyfus trial.